You didn't need it. You knew you didn't need it. But you bought it anyway. And for about 30 seconds, something in your chest loosened. Sound familiar? But the real reason is far stranger than you think. What you're about to understand is why stress doesn't just drain your energy. It rewires the way your brain makes every single financial decision you face. Your brain is not one thing. It's more like two systems running at the same time, pulling in opposite directions. One system is slow, deliberate, calculating. It reads the price tag, checks the bank balance, weighs the options. The other system is fast, automatic, emotional. It reacts before you've even finished a thought. Under normal conditions, these two systems work together. But under stress, the balance shifts. The slow, calculating system gets quieter. The fast, emotional system gets louder. And that shift changes everything about how you spend. Think about the last time you had a brutal day, a deadline that ran over, a conversation that went sideways, a bill that arrived at exactly the wrong moment. By the end of it, you weren't making decisions the way you normally do. You were making decisions the way someone makes decisions when they're exhausted and running on fumes. Which means you were making decisions based on how things felt, not what they cost. That's not weakness. That's neuroscience. When your body is under stress, it releases cortisol. Cortisol is your body's alarm signal. It sharpens your focus on whatever feels threatening and dulls everything else. And one of the things it dulls is your ability to delay gratification. Your brain, flooded with cortisol, stops caring as much about future consequences. It starts caring almost entirely about right now. Not next month's credit card statement, not the savings goal you set in January. Right now, this moment, this feeling, and buying something, almost anything, can change how you feel right now. This is what researchers call retail therapy, though the name makes it sound lighter than it is. The act of making a purchase triggers a small release of dopamine. Dopamine is the chemical your brain uses to signal reward. It's the same chemical released when you eat something you love, when you hear good news, when something clicks and finally makes sense. Shopping hijacks that system. It gives your brain a shortcut to relief. And when you're stressed, your brain is actively searching for that shortcut because the stress itself feels unbearable. Here's the part nobody tells you. The thing you buy barely matters. It's not really about the item. It's about the act of choosing. Psychologist Daniel Ariely has spent decades studying how humans make decisions, and one pattern that appears again and again is this. Feeling in control reduces the experience of stress. When you're overwhelmed, your sense of control collapses. The deadline is out of your hands. The conflict is unresolved. The bill is already there. But the decision to buy something, that's yours. You chose it. You initiated it. You completed it. And that tiny act of agency sends a signal to your brain that you still have some power over your world. Even if that power costs you $40 you didn't plan to spend. Now here's where it gets more complicated. Stress doesn't just change what you buy. It changes how much you're willing to pay. People under emotional distress anchor to higher price points. They are more likely to overlook the cheaper option, more likely to justify a premium as worth it in the moment, more likely to skip the comparison entirely. Because comparison takes cognitive effort, and cortisol has borrowed that effort to deal with whatever your brain thinks is a threat. You walk in for one thing, you leave with four, and somehow, each individual decision felt reasonable at the time. This is also why stress spending tends to cluster around very specific categories. Comfort food, clothing, small tech upgrades, skincare, things that feel like self-care but carry a receipt. Your brain isn't choosing randomly. It's choosing the categories that historically delivered fast relief, or that carry a story about taking care of yourself. Stress gives you permission to spend on things you'd normally talk yourself out of. The internal negotiation that usually happens, do I really need this? Can I wait? Is there a cheaper version? Gets bypassed. The answer becomes yes before the question is fully formed. There's also a timing pattern worth noticing. Stress spending rarely happens at the beginning of a hard period. It happens near the end of it, or in the middle of recovery. When you've been under pressure for days and you finally get a small window of relief, a lunch break, a quiet evening, a weekend, that's when the spending happens. Your brain interprets the break as permission. You survived something hard. You deserve something. That thought, which feels like self-compassion, is often just cortisol looking for an exit, and the modern environment makes that exit extremely easy to find. One-click purchases, instant delivery, seamless tap to pay, push notifications timed to land when you're most likely to be winding down. Every friction that might have slowed you down and given your slow brain a chance to catch up has been removed, deliberately, by people who understand exactly what stress does to decision-making. The system was not built around your well-being. It was built around your vulnerability, which means the cards are already stacked before you even pick up your phone. And there's something else happening underneath all of this that rarely gets discussed. Chronic stress changes your relationship with money at the identity level. When stress is constant, not a bad day here and there, but weeks of pressure with no real break, your brain starts to treat spending as one of the only reliable pleasures available to you. Work is stressful, relationships are strained, sleep is poor, but the moment of choosing something for yourself, of having it arrive, of opening a package, that moment is still yours. It still feels good. And so your brain slowly, quietly, begins to build spending into the architecture of how you cope. Not as an occasional slip, as a system. This is not a character flaw. It's not evidence that you're bad with money or that you lack discipline. It's evidence that you're human and that your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do. Find relief as fast as possible from whatever feels painful. The problem is that the relief is borrowed. You pay for it later, literally, in ways that create more stress, which creates more spending, which creates more stress. That loop is quiet at first. It builds slowly, until one day you look at a credit card statement and genuinely cannot account for where half of it went. You can account for it now. It didn't go to things you wanted. It went to moments when you needed relief, and buying something was the easiest version of relief available to you. So what actually changes that? The first thing is naming what's happening as it's happening, not after the purchase, not in the guilt spiral the next morning, but in the moment when the urge appears. There is a measurable difference between feeling an urge and recognizing it as an urge. When you say to yourself, even silently, "I'm stressed, and I want to buy something to feel better," you have introduced a small gap between the impulse and the action. That gap is where your slower brain can re-enter the conversation. The second thing is understanding that the urge is pointing at something real. You actually are stressed. The stress actually does need addressing. Buying something just addresses it in a way that costs you money and wears off in minutes. The question your brain is really asking is not what do I want to buy? It's what do I actually need right now? Sometimes the answer is food, sometimes it's rest. Sometimes it's to finish one small task so you feel less behind. The urge is real. The solution it's offering is just borrowed. The third thing is redesigning what easy means for you. Your brain goes toward whatever feels like the path of least resistance. If online shopping is one click away and frictionless, that's very easy. If a short walk or a glass of water requires getting up and putting the phone down, that's comparatively harder. When you're not stressed, you can make choices that shift what's easiest. Log out of saved payment info. Delete shopping apps from your home screen. Create a 24-hour rule for any purchase above a number you choose. None of these eliminate the urge, but they extend the gap long enough for the part of your brain that knows better to actually show up. Because the real goal isn't to never feel the urge. The urge will come. Stress will come. The goal is to have a faster, easier answer available before the spending answer gets there first. Here's what that looks like in practice. You have a terrible day. You feel the pull toward your phone, toward the app, toward the cart. And instead of a rule that says don't buy that, which your cortisol-flooded brain will immediately argue with, You have an alternative that gives your brain the same thing it's actually looking for: a hit of control, a small completed action, a feeling that you did something. It doesn't have to be complicated, it just has to be real. That's what the budget alone can't fix. A budget is a plan made when you're calm, for a version of yourself that doesn't exist when you're stressed. The work is in building something your stressed self can actually access. You didn't spend more because you were irresponsible. You spent more because your brain was in pain, and shopping was the closest exit it could find. That changes where you look for the solution. One more thing worth sitting with: the guilt that comes after stress spending is also part of the loop. You spend to escape stress. The spending creates new financial stress, and that stress becomes tomorrow's trigger. So you're not just dealing with a spending habit, you're dealing with a cycle that feeds itself every time it goes unexamined. The exit isn't guilt. The exit is understanding, which is exactly what you now have. You didn't need it. You knew you didn't need it, but you bought it anyway, and now you know exactly why. If something in this video felt familiar, a specific kind of day, a specific kind of stress that always ends with your cart full, drop it in the comments. Name the trigger. What kind of day was it? What did the stress feel like right before you opened the app? Naming it out loud is the first step to catching it before it happens again. And reading what others write might help you recognize your own pattern faster than anything else will. And if this is the kind of thing you want more of, the money stuff nobody else slows down to explain, subscribe. There's more where this came from.